Another question. Let's go to the back there. Do you have a microphone? There's one. If there's one of the comfy seats near you, someone should be able to help you.
Marieke Rijhout, I represent HIRE, the European Association for Regions involved in supporting the integration of hydrogen fuel cells and electric mobility in transport systems. Okay. We were recently awarded the Electromobility Observatory, the European Electromobility Observatory by the Commission. What we see is, of course, a need in still, indeed, collecting information on what is happening with new infrastructure for these new technologies. There's a variety of different initiatives on recharging points in different cities. So there is not yet, as mentioned before, a harmonized idea of how this will happen, nor for battery electric vehicles, nor for fuel cell electric vehicles. I would like to ask Commissioner Kallas on how we would view this integration of support for these new technologies in the coming financial framework, as we have tried to put in, as you know, for road at least, the assurance that innovative technologies will be supported also under this CEF facility. Thank you.
Okay. Sorry to make you work so hard, Commissioner.
No problem, no problem. These are various aspects. Tomorrow, Commission will obviously adopt industrial, what is a communication about industrial policy in car industry, and there are some aspects of harmonizing of these technological solutions. But in general, it's a complicated issue, definitely, because again, it's somehow it's I see it in various parts of transport policy. Somehow it looks easy. Why this decision has not been made? Why it's so simple? Come on, do it. And then you see that, yes, if you start to do this harmonization, technical harmonization, then you see that, there are various technical solutions, and behind these technological solutions are very powerful companies, and behind the powerful companies there are powerful governments, and then you cannot, you will meet simply try to make a compromise. And in finances, I can really imagine how the compromise is worked out. It's you simply agree with the structure and money, but how to create the compromise about plugs, I don't really know. And this is, of course, for my colleagues most in industrial policy. But we will do our utmost in transport research part, and we, of course, are ready to support projects which will promote new fuels and new infrastructure for new type of transport. But how to make the choice, I am not an engineer. Ask me about something about economy, I will with pleasure answer.
Okay, very good. At the back on my right. We have other panelists as well. It doesn't all have to be Vice President Kallas, although he...
Indeed, it's quite a broad question. My name is Laurent Crid. I represent the FIA, so we represent 37 million road users. And in this debate, of course, in the uptake of the new technologies, we're seeing quite a number of hurdles in terms of infrastructure, in terms of cost for the new technologies, but also in terms of range issues and others. So that's why we're definitely interested in setting important targets for the internal combustion engines. And then there's a worrying trend that we see that actually the targets are set at EU level, but the actual energy consumption of the vehicles on the road is way different, and this gap is actually increasing. So my questions in general would be, if we're looking into are we on the right track, it's also questions of how efficient are the target sets given the big discrepancy between type approval CO2 values and real world emissions.
Okay. Who would, yes. I'm glad I don't have to answer that one either. Ivan, maybe one for you.
The only thing I can say to it is that today the homologation is given. There are certain rules which the industry observes, and every single car is being homologated. You have the consumption according to the standards that have been agreed. There is a test cycle, an EDC. Now the Commission and the international authorities in Geneva are working on a new test cycle, WLTP. We shall see how it will be with that one. So the only thing I can say from my side is that industry respects the homologation that is being prescribed. I would like to also use the opportunity to answer a little bit to the previous question. I have mentioned that the industry has agreed on harmonization of plugs. That's the first thing. We have agreed on Type 2, Type 2 combo. We have also a partial agreement with the United States. We are not far away from it. And again, this is not a question to Commissioner Kallas. As he said, there are other commissioners that are responsible for this. But this harmonization proposal has been laying at the table of the Commission for 1.5 years. And if you have the whole industry coming and asking for something, as far as the harmonization is concerned, that would facilitate the introduction of the electric vehicles in this case, I don't see any reason why it should take such a long time to deal with the harmonization issue, which is obviously one of the key issues.
Thanks, Ivan. I'm going to let Greg come in, and then I'm going to give you, Commissioner, a little bit more time to think about a second attempt at answering that question about why have you done nothing on the harmonisation of charging
I didn't accuse
infrastructure.
the Commissioner Kallas.
The Commission as a collegiate body. Greg.
Mr. Hodach made the point earlier that the regulation of vehicles was not the reason why there's been so much improvement. And he's absolutely right. Because one of the reasons there's been such a big improvement in the recorded, officially measured CO2 emissions from vehicles is because the vehicle industry has learnt how to fiddle the tests. And so we get a wider gap occurring between what are the official test figures and what we all experience as drivers on the road. Now, they're following the letter of the rules, but they're certainly not following the spirit of the rules. And there's a growing body of evidence now that suggests that anything between 30 and 50% of the improvement that we have seen in fuel economy on paper over the last decade is in fact being caused by simply undertaking the test under ever more extreme and unrealistic conditions. And this is something that's got to stop. And the industry needs to stop it too, because if consumers don't believe the official fuel economy figures, which are printed on their cars that they're buying, then they simply won't buy them. And the industry knows that consumers need to be brought with them. They need to be giving realistic results. And we need to close these loopholes now. Yes, we need a new test cycle. Yes, we need new test procedures as well. But we need to close these loopholes now, and to do that before we start introducing new tests and new procedures. Because if we don't, consumers will simply walk away from this market because they don't believe the information that's being given to them.
Okay, maybe we need to come to Ivan, but Commissioner Kallas again on the harmonisation issue.
I don't know. You know, it's 1.5 years. This is in European terms. This is a very short time. But of course, I can tell you a long story how it looks like in railway areas, which is so-called technical specifications of interoperability. And this is, we try also to harmonize, and this is, I suppose, I don't know, is that more difficult or less difficult issue, but it's exactly that one solution is in the hands of one group of producers, or one camp of producers. Behind this camp of producers is certain countries, and if you change something, you have to invest a lot in not only in filling stations but also in vehicles, and this is of course in railways it's the same. So this is of course it's not an excuse, but it is just maybe some illustration.
Okay.
So I would like to say something to this. I understand if you have to change something Here you don't have to change anything because you are harmonizing forward, not backwards. Harmonizing backwards is extremely difficult. Harmonizing forward, new legislation should be much easier. So just a remark on the harmonization of the charging.
You don't want to answer Greg's...
No, I have no answer to it. The industry doesn't fiddle with anything. To tell me that we are the fuel efficiency have been done on the basis of the industry fiddling with the targets and with the homologation, I have no comment to it.
Okay. Good. Question on my far right there, on the right-hand side.
Yes, thank you. It's actually not a question, it's more a comment. Coming from a research background...
Could you say who you are and where you come from?
Yes, I'm speaking in a personal capacity. My name is Elisa Bullman, and coming from a research background, I mean, having done experimental research myself, I've tested equipment which, I mean, in real operating conditions, which had been tested by manufacturers and which simply had a higher rated capacity than what we got in real operating conditions. I think this is something that's well known, and it's there for many sectors. So I would say, I personally, but again, in a personal capacity, I don't think that's something that can be eliminated. I think it's just normal that standard testing conditions are more favorable than on-site testing conditions, and then I think it's a matter of margins, which margins are acceptable, and also clarity for users. But I'm speaking here from perhaps from a bit of an academic perspective, from a researcher perspective, but I don't think this is specific for the car industry, and I don't think there is any blame or anything. I think it's just normal.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good. There's a whole range of topics to cover here, and I think I don't want to be dragged down into talking on this, focusing too much on this particular issue. So do we? I think we had other hands up from the audience. Do we have some other questions? Yes, at the back there.
Yes, Lisette Kwaak, Netherlands Permanent Representation, Environment Department. Unfortunately,
I met someone from the European, someone from the Council of Ministers.
Yes.
Excellent.
Unfortunately, I cannot speak for all member states. We're still having a debate on the regulation on CO2 car reductions and vans. But for the Netherlands, we think that we need a post-2020 target for cars and vans, especially when you think about all the consumers who really want fuel-efficient cars. We need to give them extra effort. That they have to have new. We have to have new targets to meet their wishes to meet, and we have to have new targets post 2020. Either by setting them in the current regulation or by setting a date for the Commission to start developing new climate targets or CO2 reduction targets. CO2 reduction targets. Thank you very much.
Okay. Greg? Yeah, sure. Ivan? One of you, please.
No, we have never said that we have anything against long-term targets. On the contrary, but to set the post-2020 targets before we decide on the 2020 targets is too early. Let's decide on the targets that are now laying as a proposal on the table, and let's then talk about the long-term targets. In this framework, we have absolutely no problem with it, and I fully agree that once the 2020 targets are being set, let's discuss and let's set the long-term targets afterwards.
I mean, it's an interesting contrast here, isn't there? Because earlier we heard from Shell, who were pleading for 2030 targets, and the motor industry that says we can't set 2025 targets until after we've set the 2020 values. It's an interesting contrast. For me, the message is very simple, actually. If we don't set post-2020 targets, there's no investment certainty for the people that are developing the technologies which we are going to need in the post-2020 period. And we're not going to need very many, if any, electric vehicles or hydrogen vehicles to meet our proposed 2020 targets. So there's no regulatory driver to go beyond that into the electric vehicles, into the hydrogen technologies. We need 2025 targets to give us that market certainty and to encourage the investment. And that's a very good reason for doing it now.
Commissioner Callas, can I bring you in on this? We know you as a liberal with a small L and maybe sometimes with a big L. I'm not sure what the difference is, but I get the feeling that economically, politically, you're not in favour of targets per se, that you're more of a markets man. But at the same time, so where's the balance? Because there's going to have to be a debate starting fairly soon on the whole range of post-2020 targets. And some of your colleagues have already spoken out that there are too many targets, too many mechanisms, particularly on achieving the climate change targets. You said you're open to sub-targets on the clean fuel strategy. Where do you stand on targets and in the 2020 environment timeframe?
I think that there is, of course, a possibility to have a balance, equilibrium between targets and market measures. I would say that during last Commission there was a big enthusiasm to have targets and sometimes also underestimating the practical difficulties in achieving of these targets. You probably all know what is going on with emission trading scheme in aviation. So it's it is. I am not against targets, but I don't mystify also the targets as it can be a solution for everything. If we have a target, we must have a very clear mechanism how to achieve these targets as well. Targets must be, as a good revolutionary, I always say that there must be ambitious targets, and the targets must be enough ambitious to have also realistic solutions. But no, in every concrete case there is concrete balance, and you cannot say that, okay, let's solve everything having targets. And definitely I also, as you mentioned, as a pro-marketeer, I also clearly say that we need targets. It's very, very necessary and a necessary element in all our planning process.
Sorry, please. Yeah.
Well, obviously we need targets, but we need to be aware that the political context has changed since a couple of years due to the crisis, and when I remember President Barroso and the Commission were very much focusing on their climate policies, and this has changed. I think today there's less enthusiasm to come up with some new proposals. But I think if you really want to achieve things, obviously you need this. Now the ETS system is not a good example because this is exactly a market-based instrument. But here we have to cope with the difficulty that we are in a global world and that other players don't want to play the game, and that's a very difficult issue. And I know that within ICAO, the International Civil Aviation Organization, there are talks going on in order to try to solve the issues. But I fully believe that as a European Union we can also in global markets such as aviation and maritime transport play an important pioneer's role, and I think we should continue to do so. Although we know that the difficulties, so maybe just since I have the floor now, just to agree with what has been said about the need for standardization and how difficult it is. And I think you can make a distinction between things that are new and older things, because in railways, and we are very much expecting the fourth railway package, which is coming soon. There will be these proposals to give the agency, the European agency, railway agency, much more power in certification procedures, of rolling stock and material in the railway sector. because nobody or almost nobody knows, but for each locomotive, for each part of the rolling stock, for each signaling system, the member states have different rules, and in order to have a more, let's say, a more efficient railway system that is able to compete with road transport, obviously these are all difficult problems, and if we want to have a good, a more sustainable transport system, the railways shall have to play a more important role, and this will be one of the big issues that we have to tackle the next few years, and so this will be in the European Parliament a big debate on how we can achieve this. This will not be easy.
Okay, thanks. Do we have any more questions from the floor? One very briefly, because I think the Commissioner has to leave. So if your question could be very brief, please, and then we'll...
Yeah. My name is Jonas Thijs. I'm researching on climate and energy issues at the College of Europe. And my question is very brief. Can I take away from this evening that if the Commission would like to have, let's say, a more ambitious policy and the industries agrees with it, is it then the member states who are standing on the brakes, which you agree, or is that what it is in a nutshell?
It's difficult to foresee where will be the where it will go through and where will be the obstacles. But no, I think so that if industry is in favor, then it's of course much easier also for member states to find a compromise. If industry is against, then it's of course much more difficult process.
Good. Ivan, very quickly, please.
Very quickly. We have always said that one thing that we have to do is to preserve the functioning of the internal market. And just to stop for a second on this one, there is no harmonization of taxation regarding fuels and motor vehicles. If you would do that, it would help enormously. I know it's almost impossible, but it's one of the things that we have always asked for, we have supported, we never got it.
Okay. Do you want to come back on that? Or
Excise tax is regulated at European level. But of course, the rate is in the hands of member states.
Yeah. Okay.
So,
good. Two things are noticeable: death and discussions of taxes, it seems. I'm going to wrap up very, very briefly because the Commissioner obviously has to leave. I think we've seen it's a very difficult political debate where the noble intentions at European level are frequently frustrated because of the short-termism of some politicians in national governments, not at local level, of course, or in the European Parliament, who are always visionary and supportive and going in the right direction, of course. Thank you all. Thank you to our panellists, and thank you for attending this evening. Thank you very much, Vice President Kallas. There is an opportunity to mingle, drink wine and network outside. If I could just have one further request, we have feedback forms on your seats. So if you could fill out those feedback forms and hand them back to us before you leave. It's a very useful process. There we go. There's a little slide, the wonders of technology. There's a little, it helps us plan and tweak future events to maximise consumer satisfaction. Thank you very much.
thank you.